Om Bhadram Karnaibe Shrunuyama Devaha Bhadram Pashyemakshabhiryajatraha Sthirairangai Stuštuvagam Sastanubhihi Vyashema Devahitam Yadayuhu Swasti na Indro Vriddhashravah Swasti na Pusha Vishwavedah Swasti nastarksho Arishtanemi Swasti no Brihaspatir Dadhatu Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let's pray together. We offer our salutations to the all-loving being who endows all beings with consciousness. We meditate on the Lord, who is the origin of the universe. Lord, Thou abidest in all, Thou art all, Thou assumest all forms. Thou art the origin and goal of all. Thou art the self of all. Thou art existence, knowledge and bliss. Salutations unto Thee. May the world be peaceful. May the wicked become gentle. May all creatures think of mutual welfare. May their minds be occupied with what is spiritual and abiding. May our hearts be immersed in selfless love for the Lord. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Welcome, friends, and happy Mother's Day. Today we have the guest lecture. Swami Atmajnanananda ji from Washington DC Center will be giving today's special service on, the title is, sounds a little unusual, The Horseman Hidden in the Dust. So many of you have already heard him yesterday giving a wonderful retreat, and many of you who were not here yesterday, I am sure have heard him on previous visits here, his previous visits here. So he is very well known for his very good understanding of Vedantic concepts, and in a harmonized way he presents them to the audience. He gets invited to give such discourses and talks all over, and we are fortunate that he could come for this weekend. So without much ado, I welcome him, thank him for having come, and request him to begin his lecture for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Swamiji, and thank you for the invitation. It's always nice to come here. I've been coming for a long time, and it's nice to see all the friends and familiar faces and people I've known, even from different places also, who end up here. So I'm always very happy to come here. Thank you. The theme for this weekend has been, well, we called it a Parliament of Religions. It simply meant that I'm going to try to tie in different religious traditions with our basic Vedanta philosophy. And yesterday we heard a little bit about the dark night of the soul with Christianity, and this Thakur's teaching about this vyakulata, longing for a union with God. And then we also heard a little bit about the Sikh tradition in Guru Nanak and Sri Ramakrishna. This evening we'll be hearing something about the Sufi tradition. This is where the title comes from. We'll get to that in a minute. I joined our monastic order in a place called Trabuco Canyon in Southern California. This is a branch of the Hollywood Center there. And it was originally a place called Trabuco College of Prayer. It was started by a man named Gerald Hurd, and it was meant for study of comparative religion, mystical traditions throughout the world, and they had a fantastic library. So when I first got there, I read all of the books that I could find, things that I hadn't read before. My background was really Vedanta. That was my main interest, but I read about all these Catholic saints, and then a lot of Buddhist literature, and other mystical traditions, and then they had a nice section on Sufi literature. So I read all of that, and I was really charmed by the tradition, the very beautiful blending of God as impersonal absolute reality, who is referred to as the beloved. So there's a loving attitude is there, at the same time formless. The formless reality, because part of Islam, so there's no human form. At the same time, highly devotional. So it's a very nice blend. And the Sufi tradition also is a very liberal type of tradition. So I read a lot, and I was especially attracted to the poems of Jalaluddin Rumi. And the title of this talk is from one of the poems of Rumi. So I'll talk a little bit about him, a little bit about the Sufi tradition. You know, Sri Ramakrishna, we say he practiced Islam. He really practiced the Sufi tradition within Islam. That one teacher came, as many did during his period of sadhana, and Sri Ramakrishna followed all of the tenets of Islam, but especially this ecstatic type of love of God that's found in the Sufi tradition, and had a vision of Muhammad, and always looked upon Islam as one of the great religions of the world. When he said God can be realized through all religions, of course he included Islam. When he would say that water may be called pani, it may be called jal, it may be called water, he was referring to Hinduism, Christianity, and Islam. In general, all religions, really, in particular those three, but all religions. When we read a lot of the Sufi literature, especially the Sufis from India, but not only them. Rumi was from of course at that time it was Persia. Now we can say it's around the Afghanistan and Iran, Turkey area, somewhere in there. We find the tremendous overlap and agreement with very basic Vedantic teachings. And many of the mystic traditions of the world that we consider to be outside of some of the Vedantic teachings, especially with things like reincarnation. If we look at the mystical traditions of the world in almost all religions, we find that even something like reincarnation they accepted. In the Jewish mysticism, early Christian mysticism, and then of course in the Sufi tradition. So I want to read just to give an illustration, one of the most famous poems of Rumi, where he says, "I died as mineral and became a plant. I died as plant and rose to animal. I died as animal and I was man. Why should I fear? Was I less by dying? Yet once more I shall die as man, to soar with angels blessed. But even from angelhood I must pass on. All except God doth perish. When I have sacrificed my angel soul, I shall become what no mind ever conceived. Oh, let me not exist, for non-existence proclaims in organ tones, to him we shall return." Very, very remarkable statement and explanation of reincarnation. Anyhow, the Sufi Rumi, he spoke about the religion of love. Basically, the Sufi tradition, as I say, looks upon God as the beloved. Something like this, what we call this Madhura Bhava, when we were talking about these different attitudes yesterday. And many of these poems include this attitude of the lover to the beloved. Swami Vivekananda loved some of these poems. Some of his most beautiful lectures, he ends by quoting some of these Sufi poems. There's one where he says the lover was outside the door of the beloved and knocks on the door, and the beloved said, "Who is there?" And he says, "It is me, my beloved," and she doesn't answer. So he asks again, "Who is it?" He says, "It is me." There's no answer. Then he says, "Who is there?" He said, "It is your very own self." And then she opens the door. So there's a beautiful blend of Advaita, of oneness and everything, and again, this path of love. The one poem that I'm going to refer to, the poem itself is not very remarkable. I don't remember anything about the other verses. This one line really struck me as so insightful and so consistent with Vedanta philosophy. It says, "Again, within the heart, there is a heart hidden, like a horseman hidden in dust. The stirring of the dust is caused by the horseman. It is he who causes this dust to dance." Now, in this one couplet, we can say, we find so many basic themes of the Upanishads and of Vedanta. Teachings of Sri Ramakrishna, teachings of Swami Vivekananda, we'll see so many areas of overlap. First of all, God dwelling within the heart is thought of as the horseman. This is the first thing. Second thing is, hidden by a veil of Maya. What is the veil of Maya? The dust. And the third thing is, who is the one who is causing this dust? The horseman himself. So it's the Maya of Mahamaya dwelling within the heart, who is there, and yet we don't see her. So it's a very beautiful way of explaining, in very typical, we can say, typical of that region language with the horsemen. Afghanistan, you know, and that area is known for their horses. I'll talk about that a little bit. I spend a lot of time in that area of the world. And there's a great culture of riding horses and doing everything like that. Before I get into the philosophy of all of this, I want to say a few words about the author himself, Jalaluddin Rumi. We also find so much similarity between these great saintly figures who were also poets. I was mentioning yesterday how many in India we have, with Mirabai and Surdas and Kabir and everything, but also the whole Sufi tradition. For some reason, they were all great poets and songwriters. So we find that with Rumi and Hafez and many of the others. He was born in the year 1207. It's quite ancient. September 30th, 1207, in the city of Balkh, which is now in Afghanistan. And then this was considered to be, now it's a very remote place, but for some reason it was a great center for Persian culture and Sufi writing and scholarly Islamic work. It was a very well-known place at that time. And then this Rumi settled later in a town called Konya in what is now Turkey. And he died there in 1273. So there are many different countries in that area that claim him as their national poet. Iran, Turkey, and Afghanistan. Of course, geography and everything changed at that time. None of them really existed. Everything at that time was part of the Persian Empire. When I had my first trip to India, I mentioned yesterday also that my early trips are all connected with these three themes. I traveled through these countries. I was very interested in seeing different cultures and different religions and seeing how different people lived. I had a very curious kind of a goal in mind when I traveled. I wanted to see what made people happy. Yeah. because this was a time, the end of the 60s, early 70s, when there was a lot of unrest in the United States and a lot of protest movements and anti-materialism and anti-war and everything. So I was curious, and I saw that these cultures that were very simple and traditional and had something to hold on to, that these people, simple people, seemed to be the happiest people. And it's so sad to me personally, especially to see what's happened to Afghanistan and some of these countries, that the people were so nice and so, they have such a tradition of hospitality. That you're traveling through these places, they're so helpful and everything, that it's very sad to see how everything has been just torn up with war and violence and hatred. The life of Rumi was one that was very interesting. It was filled with a lot of drama, a lot of high drama and intrigue. And we see this transformation that took place with Rumi, a little bit like what we saw with Chaitanya Deva. Chaitanya Deva, I was saying yesterday that he was a very great Sanskrit pundit and very proud of his learning. And the Rumi, whether he was proud or not, we don't know, but he was a scholar. He was trained that way. He came from a very orthodox type of family. This was their tradition, to study the scriptures and to expound on them and everything. So he was born in that family, and they were well-to-do. They were a sophisticated type of upper-class family, and he was a very sober type of scholar, we can say. Then into his life came one of these ecstatic Sufis. He wasn't the founder of the Sufi tradition, one of their early ones, but someone by the name of Shams-e Tabrizi, from Tabriz. And many of Rumi's poems will mention this name because there's almost the same tradition of Guru Bhakti in the Sufi tradition that we find in many of the traditions within India. So sometimes we're not sure if the beloved is even his guru, or if it's God, or if they're one and the same. And we see in this Sufi tradition, even in India and Bangladesh, yesterday I talked about this Lalon Fakir, that he talks about this Moner Manus, the man of my heart. And sometimes he's talking about his guru with such love and such reverence. Sometimes he's talking about the divine presence within. And sometimes it seems both, without any distinction. Anyhow, this Rumi was absolutely transformed after meeting this ecstatic, wandering, saintly figure, and immediately cared for nothing. This scholarly stuff didn't interest him at all. He became a great seeker of truth, and this was a turning point in his life. So we find that this transformation took place when he was still a young man, but there was still lots of intrigue and marriage and murder mysteries and all of that. And when his guru passed away, this Rumi went through a period of tremendous grief also. But because of this, so this was a little bit of that vyakulata within his heart, a little bit of the pangs of separation, in his case, were from the guru. But because of that, it led him to write nearly 70,000 verses of poetry. Yeah, so a tremendous amount of creativity came out of him. Most of these were in Persian, and some may have been in some other local languages, I don't know. And these are contained in the two great books. One is called Divan-e-Shams-e Tabrizi, and the other is Masnavi. And after his death, which very often happens, we find that these great saintly souls, they don't start any religious tradition. It's their followers who start it after them. So through his son, the Mevlevi order of the whirling dervishes was founded. And part of their spiritual practice is a beautiful dance, where music and dance and poetry and song, where they actually whirl, and this helps them go into some type of spiritual mood. And we see how important dance was in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. when we first read, especially those who grow up in the West and have no idea what dance means in India, huh? We think dance, man and woman are together and they're dancing like this. Yeah, we read that Swami Krishna gets up and is dancing. It's hard to imagine. And then we go and we see this type of dance. And even Swami Vivekananda says that we ourselves thought that an old man, of course he was only 45, 46, 47 in that day, to see an old man to get up and dance, how strange it would seem, but he was so graceful when he danced. So this song and dance in the life of Sri Ramakrishna was very important. He himself was a Sufi in some sense, we can say, if we take it in the highest sense of just meaning a great mystic and a great lover of God, and one who did it partly through music and dance and everything. So this whole school of the whirling dervishes, this also gets traced back to Rumi. And if we look at all of the mystical poetry of every tradition throughout the whole world, Rumi may be the most popular and the best known of all. That he's read in so many languages. He really his influence has really been something tremendous. So we can place him in that same tradition that we saw yesterday with the Guru Nanak and with all of the other great saints, even to the later period with Ram Prasad and Kamalakanta, two great Bengali saintly worshippers of the Divine Mother. He falls within that same type of tradition of these gifted writers who were ecstatic lovers of God and who had this mystic union with God on different levels in different ways. Like the others, the Rumi, he didn't care for any type of caste distinction. Now, we don't think of caste distinction within Islam, but even then, their society was broken up into the educated, the uneducated, those who came from good families and this and that. So he didn't care for any of that, any of the rules of society. He only cared for love of God. So he was a great ecstatic mystic that way, where he saw oneness everywhere. Just to kind of summarize his main teachings, because he once he had his transformation, he never wrote anything like a philosophical text with A, B, C, D, E, that these are the main tenets of our school, nothing like that. But we can kind of see from his writings that first thing will be that the heart yearns for union with the beloved. So this is how we refer to God dwelling within. There's this longing for union, and this is our real nature. So again, this dualism and non-dualism, this play back and forth, this beautiful combination, and this what is our real nature? We've become separated from that. So some idea of Maya, huh? That somehow we're living in a condition where we don't know the real truth of things. The real truth is oneness. We're already one with the beloved, and yet we feel some type of separation. And that the path to eliminating this separation, the path to oneness, is through ecstatic love, ecstatic longing, and through music, poetry, and dance. Then he says that after attaining the blessed state of union, one returns to the world. So this is something we see with Sri Ramakrishna's teaching. He says, suppose a clerk gets thrown in jail, and he finishes his sentence and gets released. What will he do? Will he go back singing and dancing in the street? He'll go back and become a clerk again. But transformed, now he's free that way. So the same type of thing, he returns to the world. Why? Now to be of service to the whole of creation without discrimination, without distinction, no distinction based on belief, race, class, or nation. He wrote in one of his poems, "On the seeker's path, wise men and fools are one. In his love, brothers and strangers are one. Go on, drink the wine of the beloved. In that faith, Muslims and non-Muslims are one." So we see a very liberal type of tradition that we have. Now I want to get back to this basic theme within the heart is a heart hidden, like a horseman hidden in the dust. We find when we read the Upanishads that there are two great themes there. One is that Brahman, or the divine presence, dwells within the hearts of all. And really, very specifically, we have this idea, even though Brahman is all-pervading and can't be located anywhere, still, in some psychological or mystical sense, the presence of Brahman, the city of Brahman, is said to dwell within the heart center, not the physical heart, of course. And this is a common theme even in devotional literature, that the devotee will also picture God dwelling within the heart, seated on the lotus of the heart. We have many different ways of looking at it. We have all this image of Hanuman ripping his chest open to show that within is nothing but Rama, Sita, Lakshmana, that way. So we have this idea from the dualistic point of view. The presence of the divine within the heart is thought of as the Antaryaman. The Antaryaman is the inner controller, the inner guide, our companion, the beloved dwelling within, who is a source of joy, a source of comfort, almost like some sense of idea of conscience that we have that tells us what is the right thing to do. This divine presence of God within the heart is a very palpable thing, a very important thing in the life of the devotee of God. Even if you look at all of the prayers that we have, you look at the meditation mantra that we have for Sri Ramakrishna and the meditation mantra that we have for Holy Mother, you'll always find this Hridaya Kamala Madhye, within the lotus of the heart, or Dhyayet Chitta Sarojastham, we meditate on the Holy Mother dwelling within the lotus of the heart. There's always something about this heart center, some mystical feeling about that. But in the Upanishads, where we don't have any emphasis on this personal God, where God is this infinite absolute reality, it's still the heart center. And it may be just a space the size of a thumb. It may be the city of Brahman, an infinite absolute reality, but still, somehow, mystically, it's found within the heart. It may be thought of as the cave of the heart. Now, this idea of the cave of the heart, we're getting a little closer to the theme here, because cave is incredibly dark when you go into the interior of a cave. There's a place called Vasishta Guha that is just on. If you go to Hardwar and Rishikesh, you go a little further up. That is a cave where the great sage Vasishta was supposed to have stayed and meditated and everything. And if you go inside this cave, it's so dark that really you absolutely can't see anything. The total darkness. You go in far enough and you just, there's no chance for light to get in. If you stay there long enough, then gradually your eyes adjust a little bit and you can see a little bit. There's, I think, some Shiva Lingam even inside, something like that. But when you first go, it's absolutely black. So we have this idea a little bit that ultimate reality is somehow hidden. Or sometimes we have this idea, nihita, that it's like buried treasure almost. Dwelling within the heart and at the same time hidden within the heart, very deep within the heart. So it's there and it's the essence of our very being, but somehow it's not easily accessible to us. There's too much dust from the horsemen. So this is what we have in this poem. So it may be buried, it may be out of view, whatever it is, it's always present and always absent. This is the great paradox. That God is, there's not a moment when that divinity is not there, and yet, if we're not aware of it, then we go searching for it all over the place. So Swamiji has some beautiful statements about that why are you running here and there, you're looking in church and temple and everything, that God is dwelling right within your heart, and yet we search everywhere else for Him. Now, why the heart? Any special reason for that? We sometimes make a distinction between the head and the heart. that the heart is for devotees, the heart is the center of emotions, the head is for the intellectuals, for the thinkers. This is, we do it partly, I have my own theory about this, partly because all of our senses are in the head, except for touch. And somehow, if we through this sense of sight, we feel that we're seeing here, we're not really seeing in any particular place. And hearing and speaking. So because we speak through this part, and when we think in words, somehow that connection comes. If we didn't know that the brain was here, and if all of our senses were located on our knee, we would probably think that this is center of thought, the knee. It's a psychological thing, because thought, really, it has no spatial location the way other things do. So partly because of that in modern days we tend to think that we associate the head. We associate the head with the intellectual and with the heart with the emotional. In the early days, the Vedantic tradition, everything was in the heart. They didn't have this idea that thought is somewhere in the head. If anything, mind and everything would pervade the body because our senses are all sense of touch is there, so mind has to be there also. But the word manas, which we use for mind, is equally and perhaps sometimes better translated as heart. We find this, and the location of it will be here, within what we call the heart center. I remember an interesting thing. There was a friend of mine whose brother was named Suman. It's a very common name. And before he told me his name, he said it means good-hearted. Now, I always thought, Suman, I always thought intelligent, good mind, literally. But for him, this manas equally meant heart. So it's a very, very nice way for us to understand that the distinction between heart and mind is an artificial distinction. This is the point I'm trying to make. That everything is contained within our conscious life. Some of it is more intuitive, some of it is more emotional, some of it is more cogitational, if there's such a word. So we make this false distinction between the head and heart, but actually it's all contained within our conscious life. And we can say it's all contained within mind, because mind is the instrument. But the mind also has the ability to feel. It can be intuitive that way. So it's really a question of language more than anything else. The other interesting thing is something that is pointed out by Ramana Maharshi. He gives his own explanation. He says, if somebody asks you, who are you? Point to yourself. It's me. We point to the heart center. We don't say it's me. So there's some feeling that our sense of identity is also within this heart center. Then the two organs, vital organs, are also located there. This is another reason why the devotee will think more in terms of the heart. Because what are the things that accompany emotion? The heart beats faster, We get angry or nervous or afraid of something. The heart beats faster. We fall in love, Bump, 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 bump. We connect all of these things, Valentine's Day and hearts and all of that. We connected with that. And our breathing becomes faster. We become very calm, it becomes slower. So these are the two organs, vital organs, that are located within this area. So there's kind of a psychological reason also for all of this. Now, Rumi talks about the heart which is hidden within the heart. Is there only one heart, or are there two hearts? And what is he talking about? This is also something that we find in the language of the Upanishads, that there's an eye behind the eye, an ear behind the ear, mind behind the mind. That means that this divine presence, which is shining its light on everything, which is the real knower, is present there behind everything. Otherwise, we wouldn't perceive anything, we wouldn't understand anything, we would have no awareness of anything. That light of consciousness has to be there behind. And this witnessing consciousness is there as the real observer of everything. The mind is observing external things, the witness is observing the mind. So this is the heart hidden within the heart, will be the higher self, will be the beloved, the presence of personal God for the devotee. The silent witness, the real knower, the real divine self within, or the Supreme Lord. We have all of these different ways of understanding it. This is why this wonderful term sakshin, the witness, this can be used in a very impersonal way, as the higher self within is simply observing everything, not attached to anything. Or, as we find in Gita, Sri Krishna himself will say, I am the sakshin. That who is it who is really dwelling within, watching everything? This is the presence of God within, who is the real witness of everything. In chapter 13, there's a very nice section about this, the kshetra and kshetrajna, the field and the knower of the field. And it looks very much like the knower of the field will be the higher self. That's just watching everything. The mind is perceiving things and thinking things, and this higher self is observing. But when Sri Krishna wants to say, who is this kshetrajna, the knower of the field, he said, it's me. I am the knower of the field. So we have this identity of not just Atman and Brahman. This is the interesting thing about the Gita. It's not simply Atman and Brahman. It's also Atman, Brahman, and this Antaryaman. And Ishvara, we can say, that Ishvara dwells within the hearts of all beings. Very famous verse that we have in the final chapter of Gita, using the term Ishvara, not simply that Ishvara is the creator of the universe. Ishvara is also dwelling within the heart, causing us to go around like we're on a merry-go-round, go up and down, without thinking that we're doing everything. We're not going anywhere. We're not doing it. But we have this beautiful harmony of the individual self, the supreme self, and the presence of the divine within, even in this personal form. So this gives great scope for us. If we want to be big jnanis, we can say that, yes, the Atman, Paramatman, dwells within. Perfectly impersonal. This witness doesn't add anything to anything. It's like a mirror. The mirror doesn't change anything. It's completely impersonal. Whatever comes before it, it witnesses. Or we can be great devotees and say, this is the one who hears my prayers. This is the one who is within, always with me, my constant companion. So we same phenomenon and different ways of understanding it and explaining it and enriching our spiritual life in different ways. Now, this question that comes up, if the Lord is present within the heart, or the Paramatman, however we understand it, as our very own self, why don't we know it? Why are we not aware of it? Why are we looking everywhere else? Why are we not finding it? And why do we identify ourselves with everything else? Body, mind, senses, all these external things we identify with and create for ourselves all sorts of problems. We create a sense of I, with this sense of ego, which is perfectly unsuited for happiness in the world. Because it's identified with everything finite, it's identified with our neediness and with our feeling of incompleteness and our desire to possess things and enjoy things, everything that keeps us from being content in life. All comes from this failure to understand the real self dwelling within. Why? Hidden in the dust. Now, why should it be this way? And how did it happen? And what can we do about it? The closest thing we have to what I would say is a scientific explanation is from the Kathopanishad, a very famous verse from the Kathopanishad that says, look, this just happens to be the nature of things, that the mind has a tendency to go outward, and if only we could turn it around, shine the light within, okay, then we could see the self within, but it goes outward. And this is something that is just natural. it's blamed on somebody called Swayambhu. But we can also say Swayambhu means that this is just the way things are. This is the human condition. This is what we find ourselves in without any very good explanation that way. From a very young age, the infant identifies with everything external. The infant cannot distinguish between its own body and the body of the mother. It's just filled with external things, bombarded with phenomena, colors and shapes and forms. It can't recognize any. Gets a little bit older and starts to make little distinctions, but it's takes a long time before the mind of a child is developed enough to even know that it has anything called an interior life. And the child psychologists will say that one of the markers of development of a child is when they understand that they can tell a lie. That there's something that they know is true within that the other person doesn't have access to. Huh? Very interesting thing. I'll tell you a funny story. I still have a niece. When one of my nieces was very young, we had a family friend who had a son who had all sorts of emotional developmental problems. And she was asking, why does he behave that way? So I thought I'd be very intelligent, give her a good explanation. And I said, some people have something wrong physically with the body, some disease or something like that. He has something wrong with his mind. So she looked at me and she said, what is a mind? Then I realized that, just the way we develop, that we're not even aware that we have a mind until we reach a certain age and a certain stage. So this is one type of explanation. It's not really the why of it, it's kind of the how of it. It doesn't explain why should it be this way. There's no answer to that one. And that kind of, we'll get to that with this idea of Maya. Now, the second type of explanation is a highly Vedantic explanation, and actually probably the best one. Why don't we see the self within? Because the self is not an object. We are that self. The seer cannot become an object. The subject remains the subject. If we objectify it, turn it into an object, then it's no longer the subject. So the knower can never be known as an object. When we talk about Brahmajnana, or Atmajnana, my name, we talk about that, we don't mean that we know it and we perceive it. We use that language, of course, the darshan, that we're seeing something. We use that language, but it doesn't mean that we can see it as we see an object. We can't see it with this dualistic distinction between the knower and the known, because it's always the knower itself. We can realize it as our very own self when the mind reaches a higher level, when this ordinary mind is functioning in some kind of mystical union, which can be explained very well, but ordinarily it's impossible for us. We shouldn't think that we can simply turn within and see the self. If we could see the self, that means we're something separate from the self. So it's partly language, and it's partly an actual, very deep, subtle truth that what we're trying to find is the one who's trying to find it. That is really the seer himself who has become forgetful. It's a very strange type of phenomenon. If we remember, it's getting late. If we remember Swamiji's story of the two birds, he takes from Mundaka Upanishad, but he makes it his own story. That the lower bird wants to realize the higher bird, looks up and sees him and everything, but at the end he finds that he was the higher bird at the very beginning. But that only comes with that final state of union. Now, the other explanation that we get is that this all happens through Maya. Now, the Maya is a very beautiful explanation, which is no explanation. If we want to explain something that that is unexplainable, we say what happens to Maya. And what is the definition of Maya? That which is inscrutable. There's a very nice verse. It says, Avidyaya avidyatvam idam evatu lakshanam. What is the characteristic of avidya, of Maya? The fact that it's incomprehensible. And then the second line says, Yat pramana asahishnutvam. It can't stand the light of truth. You can't measure it against anything. Anyata vastu sabhavet. Otherwise, it would be something real. So the Maya is nothing real, and yet it has this power to raise the dust, to keep us from seeing the horsemen within. It's a very interesting theory, this idea of Maya. It's understood in so many different ways, as just pure ignorance or as a power. It also gets transformed into the whole notion of Shakti, of power and everything. It's something we have to bring in if we want to keep the purity of Brahman. If Brahman is actionless, if Brahman is the only reality, then there has to be something which allows the one to appear as the many, even if there's no real transformation. So there's a certain beauty to this concept of Maya, and at the same time it's a little bit of a non-answer. It is a way of explaining something as really unexplainable, inscrutable. We have other explanations that will say that, well, nothing's really happened at all anyhow. This Swamiji was talking about Ajatavada yesterday. These are all very difficult things for us to really understand. Now, the second problem is that this horseman, can't really come under the sway of ignorance. And Maya is basically some type of ignorance. So another difficulty. So how do they explain it? Again, with symbolic and poetic type of language, that this Maya is like the wind that's blowing over the surface of the water, raising waves, somehow. It doesn't have any separate existence, and yet it can affect the ocean, but the ocean still remains the ocean unchanged. So, Sri Ramakrishna says that it's like the venom inside of the snake, that it dwells within the snake, but really within a sac within the snake. So it has the power to poison other people, but the snake is unaffected by it. So Brahman is unaffected by this Maya, and yet this Maya has the power, after this whole universe is projected, as the dreamer will project the dream, it has the power to infect the actor within the dream, so that he doesn't realize that he's also the sleeper and the dreamer. Yeah, it's a very strange type of theory. Now, devotee, it's easier. Devotee says, well, what is this nonsense? God is God. God is a power. This, what you're calling this Maya, this is the Shakti. This is the glory, the power of the Divine Mother. This was Ramakrishna's attitude. He says it's really through the will of the Divine Mother that this play will go on. And this play involves a little bit of confusion on our part. If in the play where the granny is, everyone is blindfolded, they try to touch the granny, and then they get out of the game. If everybody touches her, the game's over. She likes to keep people a little bit blindfolded. Now, you may like this, you may not like this theory, but anyhow, this is what we get with this idea. The stirring of the dust is caused by the horseman. We don't attribute it to Maya, to anything else, that this is the play of the divine. The divine is manifest within the heart and yet hidden within the heart. Both are there at the same time. We don't attribute the dust to any outside cause. It's the horseman himself, making the horse rise on his back legs and all of that. The dust will come up. Afghanistan is a very dusty place. And you see it when the horses are going, that so much dust comes, you can hardly see the horse that way. So, Swamiji says it's a very simple statement of fact, this Maya, that we have to accept it. We may not be able to explain it. We may make it disappear. This is what happens with Maya. When you shine the light on the darkness, it disappears. If we want to examine the darkness, we have two options. Either we go and try to see it in the dark, and we say, I can't see it, it's too dark. Huh? Or we shine a light and say, I can't see it, it's light. The darkness disappeared. So this is all we can do with Maya, not too much else. The time that I spent in Afghanistan was very interesting because I went to a place called Kunduz. This is the really national center for a sport that they play called buzkashi. And it's fantastic. They have horses there. They're huge and so powerful and strong. And the horsemen ride on them, and there's the carcass of a goat that's filled with stone. and there are two teams, and they try to grab hold of it and take it to, one team has one goal, they try to take it, the other has another. And you see the horses so well trained, they can even fight each other and get on their rear legs, and they hold it. It's really fantastic. And the reason I'm mentioning all of this is that this, to me, is very important. We can think of this indwelling presence of God as Divine Mother seated on the lotus, something very sweet and loving and everything. This imagery is of strength and power. And Swamiji loved this type of imagery. The self within is not supposed to be thought of as really personal. This is Paramatman. This is pure consciousness. And yet Swamiji will often talk about accessing the strength that comes from this divine presence, from the self within. So this was, we can almost say Swamiji was a prophet of strength. He has so many beautiful statements that the self, not merely the witness in personal consciousness, but the source of great fearlessness. He says, what makes a man stand up and work? Strength. Strength is goodness. Weakness is sin. If there is one word that you find coming out like a bomb from the Upanishads, bursting like a bombshell upon masses of ignorance, it is the word fearlessness. And the only religion that ought to be taught is the religion of fearlessness. Either in this world or in the world of religion, it is true that fear is the sure cause of degradation and sin. It is fear that brings evil. And what causes fear? Ignorance of our own nature. Then he says, take off the veil of hypnotism. That means get rid of the dust from the horsemen, which you have cast upon the world. Send not out thoughts and words of weakness unto humanity. Know that all sins and all evils can be summed up by that one word, weakness. It is weakness that is the motive power in all evil doing. It is weakness that makes them manifest what they are not in reality. Let them know what they really are. Let them repeat day and night what they are. Let them suck it in with their mother's milk, this idea of strength. I am he, I am he. Swamiji loved this image of the lion. So we have the Vedanta Keshari, the lion of Vedanta. He used to like to recite this line, this Nirgachiti Jagat Jala. We heard it yesterday. Pinjaradiva Keshari. Let the self break through the bonds of the ignorance, like the lion breaking out of a cage. We see, put a lion in a bamboo cage, they can't hold it, they can just break through. So this is a very beautiful way of understanding the self, not simply as pure consciousness, not even necessarily as the indwelling presence of God, but as the source of all strength and all power. If we can access that, there's nothing that we can't do. It's a very beautiful type of teaching that we have. I know you're studying Shvetashvatara Upanishad. This is very nice because it explains that this process of eliminating the dust from the horsemen is not such a simple thing. It's a little bit like getting the fire out of the wood or pressing the sesame seeds and getting oil out of it. It takes a little bit of work that way. But there's one other very nice way of getting the horseman himself to show us his face. This is what the devotee does, because this idea of God dwelling within, hiding, it's a little bit this idea of Mahamaya, the Divine Mother, that the presence of Maya within. One of the most beautiful verses from Gita is Devi Hyesha Gunamayi Mama Maya Duratyaya Mam Eva Ye Prapadyante Mayam Etam Tarantite. That Sri Krishna says, this divine Maya of mine, composed of the three gunas, is difficult to transcend. They alone cross over who take refuge in me. So what do? We take a dualistic attitude. We take refuge with the horseman within, with the Divine Mother dwelling within. We pray, Mother, please stop this dance of the horse a little bit. Let me see the face of the horseman. Mother, show me your face. Reveal yourself to me. This is what the devotee will do to eliminate this type of Maya. And Sri Ramakrishna says, don't be afraid of this Maya. Worship this Maya, face this Maya. She'll run away from you if that ignorance part, and the Divine Mother herself will reveal herself to you. So let me stop here. Maharaj, I went over a tiny bit.
Maharaj, can you repeat the verse again, the verse about the heart within the heart and the horseman?
Yes, this is within again within the heart there is a heart hidden, like a horseman hidden in dust. The stirring of the dust is caused by the horseman. It is he who causes this dust to dance. Of course, this is someone's English translation. I have no idea what the original is, but it's probably very close.
Barks has translated most of Rumi's poems.
Could be.
Barks. He has also sung them, that Barks. Yeah. Very nice. This records are available. Barks, yeah. Many, many heartfelt thanks, Swami Atmajnanananda ji, for this beautiful discourse. We heard him yesterday giving the discourse on this idea of Christianity, how all these things tie together, and Sikhism. A wonderful explanation, and this is all the beautiful way that he expressed it, saying, and what he actually did was that these things tie together, but we required him to tie all these things together. So many thanks. This was a great, beautiful discourse, and then you have to listen to it again and again, ponder over it, and see that the dust starts settling down, and you start seeing the horseman hidden in the dust. So let me tell you the upcoming programs. The next Sunday is close to this Buddha's birthday, Gautam Buddha's birthday. So we shall discuss Noble Truth, Noble Path. On coming Tuesdays and Fridays, the classes will go on as usual. Tuesday, it is that Sri Ramakrishna and his divine play. Fridays, it is Shvetashvatar Upanishad. They are at 7:30 p.m. on Tuesdays and Fridays. There is upcoming retreat. He gave yesterday a day-long retreat. June 15th, Saturday, June 15th, there is another day-long retreat to be given by Swami Kripamayananda from Toronto. And again, tying up together, his topic is harmonizing our faculties, so for progress. So please, if you want to join the retreat, I hope you want, so please register for the same. There will be some posters around already put, so please see that and register. Let me conclude with the closing prayers, and as you note, after this lecture, there is the music concert downstairs. So please try to attend this concert also. Famous musicians from India, they have come, and please join the concert also. May the Divine, who is Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Great Spirit of the Native Americans, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the all-loving being manifest himself unto us and grant us abiding understanding and all-consuming divine love. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So we will now have the evening arati, and after that there will be the music concert.